When we walk into a room, before we've said a single word, before we've shared an idea, before we've even shaken a hand, people are already forming opinions about us. Science shows it takes only a few seconds, some studies say as little as 7, for others to decide whether we are trustworthy, competent, or likable. This isn't about fairness. It's about how the human brain is wired to make sense of the world quickly. Our ancestors depended on these snap judgments for survival. In a split second, they had to determine if someone approaching was friend or foe, safe or dangerous. While the context of our lives has changed, the biology hasn't. Today, those same instincts decide if we are someone worth doing business with, someone worth listening to, or someone worth following. That first glance, the way we carry ourselves, the tone of our voice, it all becomes data points for the brain to process. And the brain loves shortcuts. Instead of waiting to gather all the information, it relies on these initial cues to draw conclusions fast. This is why two people can walk into an interview with the same resume, but the one who radiates confidence and warmth gets the nod. First impressions also have a compounding effect. Once an impression is formed, confirmation bias takes over. If someone thinks you're credible from the start, they'll notice the things you do that reinforce that belief. If they doubt you at the beginning, they'll spot every small misstep as proof they were right. In other words, the first 7 seconds don't just matter. They can define the lens through which everything else is seen. Consider the difference between walking into a meeting with your shoulders slouched versus standing tall and open. The latter communicates presence and assurance without a single word. People don't consciously analyze these things, but subconsciously, their brain is telling them whether they should lean in or tune out. The impact of these micro-judgments extends far beyond first encounters. They influence whether a client decides to trust you with their business, whether a team believes in your leadership, or whether an audience feels compelled to hear your message. These are opportunities won or lost in moments that feel insignificant but carry immense weight. It's not about dressing a certain way or memorizing the perfect handshake. It's about understanding that humans are emotional creatures first, rational creatures second. The impression you create is less about what you say and more about how you make others feel in those first seconds. Safety, warmth, and authenticity are signals our brains are always scanning for. When we understand why first impressions matter so deeply, we begin to see those initial seconds not as pressure, but as possibility. They are a chance to communicate, without words, that we are trustworthy, confident, and ready to contribute. Our brains are designed to process an overwhelming amount of information every second. To survive and function, we rely on shortcuts, mental pathways that help us make decisions quickly without analyzing every detail. These shortcuts, often called heuristics, are not flaws. They are features that allow us to navigate the complexity of human interaction at remarkable speed. When we meet someone new, the brain doesn't pause to gather a full profile of who they are. Instead, it scans for immediate cues: posture, tone, eye contact, facial expression. These signals help the brain answer primitive questions: am I safe here? Can I trust this person? Should I invest my time in listening to them? The conclusions may not always be accurate, but they are fast, and in many cases, they are effective enough to keep us moving forward. This system is the reason first impressions carry so much weight. The brain leans on these shortcuts not out of laziness, but out of necessity. Without them, we would be paralyzed by overthinking in every social exchange. Imagine needing minutes, not seconds, to decide if someone was credible enough to hire, befriend, or follow. It would be impossible to function in the pace of modern life. One of the most common shortcuts the brain uses is the halo effect. If someone appears confident, we often assume they are also competent. If someone smiles warmly, we assume they are kind and trustworthy. These assumptions aren't grounded in fact, but they allow the brain to create a working model of who the person might be, buying time until more evidence appears. Another powerful shortcut is the snap judgment of similarity. When we detect shared values, accents, or behaviors, the brain quickly tags someone as part of our tribe. This can make us more open, more generous, and more forgiving in those first interactions. Conversely, when cues signal difference, the brain may trigger caution, asking us to protect our resources or withhold trust until proven otherwise. The fascinating truth is that these mental shortcuts operate beneath conscious awareness. Most of us don't realize we've made a decision until after it's already formed. We meet someone and say, "I just have a good feeling about them," or "something feels off," when in reality, our brains have already processed dozens of subtle signals in milliseconds. Because these judgments happen so quickly, they often override logic. We might overlook credentials if someone fails to make eye contact. We might trust someone less qualified because they carry themselves with confidence. The brain privileges safety and emotional clarity over raw information in those crucial opening moments. What's important to remember is that this system is not about bias in the moral sense. It's about biology. Our ancestors, who could quickly distinguish friend from foe, ally from threat, were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. Today, that same system influences boardroom meetings, job interviews, and first dates, shaping outcomes long before rational thought has a chance to intervene. When we think about making a strong first impression, many of us focus on saying the right words, delivering the perfect introduction, or crafting a flawless response. But people are rarely moved by perfection. They are moved by presence, the sense that in those first moments we are genuinely there, fully engaged and open to connection. Presence is not about rehearsed lines or polished performances. It's about the energy we bring into the room. Do we carry tension or calm? Do we radiate warmth or distance? Long after the exact words fade from memory, what lingers is the emotional experience of how we made someone feel. Think about the people who stand out in your own memory. Chances are you don't recall every detail of what they said, but you remember the comfort, inspiration, or confidence they gave you. Presence creates emotional resonance, and that resonance is what anchors us in people's minds. Perfection, on the other hand, can backfire. When we focus too much on getting everything right, we often appear rigid, rehearsed, or even distant. Others may sense that we are more concerned with protecting our image than connecting with them. Presence requires vulnerability, the willingness to be seen as we are rather than as we think we should be. One way presence shows itself is through attentiveness. When we listen deeply, maintain eye contact, and respond with authenticity, we communicate respect. That respect makes others feel valued, and in return, they value us. It's not about having the cleverest thing to say, but about showing someone they matter in the moment. Presence also comes through in how we hold ourselves. Open posture, steady breathing, and grounded movements all signal confidence without arrogance. They show that we are comfortable enough in ourselves to make space for others. This nonverbal presence is often more powerful than any carefully chosen phrase. What makes presence so impactful is that it turns ordinary interactions into meaningful ones. A handshake, a greeting, a brief introduction. These are small acts, but when infused with presence, they leave a lasting imprint. People may not remember the details of the exchange, but they carry the feeling forward into how they view us. The truth is, presence is the real differentiator. In a world full of polished resumes, scripted pitches, and curated profiles, what cuts through is not perfection but humanity. People crave connection more than they crave flawless execution, and presence is the bridge that allows us to be remembered for how we made others feel. Trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship, whether in business, leadership, or personal life. In the very first moments of meeting someone, our brains are scanning for signals. Does this person make me feel safe, seen, and respected? These signals are rarely verbal. They come through tone, posture, expression, and the energy we project. Warmth and authenticity are the most powerful of these signals because they quiet the natural human instinct to protect ourselves. Warmth communicates care. When someone smiles genuinely, when their voice carries openness rather than judgment, it tells us that we are not under threat. Authenticity amplifies that warmth by aligning words and actions. We can sense when someone is pretending, and the smallest inconsistency can trigger doubt. But when someone shows up as real, comfortable with their strengths and honest about their imperfections, it creates safety for us to be real too. Confidence is another important signal, but on its own, it can mislead. Confidence without empathy often reads as arrogance. A person may appear capable, but if they lack warmth, we hesitate to trust them. We might admire their skill, but we don't feel drawn to them. The absence of empathy leaves a gap, and that gap feels like distance. The most trusted leaders and communicators balance these forces. They project confidence so we believe in their ability, but they pair it with empathy so we believe in their intentions. When someone can say, "I know what I'm doing and I care about you," the combination is magnetic. We feel both safe and inspired, both respected and led. Think of the last person who made you feel instantly comfortable. Chances are, it wasn't because they had the sharpest suit or the most impressive resume. It was because they looked you in the eye, listened with genuine interest, and spoke with honesty. Those simple acts of warmth and authenticity send powerful signals that bypass logic and go straight to trust. On the other hand, think of someone who projected only authority. They might have been polished and impressive, but if they didn't show empathy, the connection likely felt transactional. We may comply with authority, but we only commit to those we trust. Confidence demands respect, warmth earns loyalty. These signals matter because they shape the very first filter through which people experience us. In seconds, others decide if we are worth opening up to, worth collaborating with, worth following. And once that impression is made, it frames every interaction that follows. If we lead with warmth and authenticity, trust becomes the default setting rather than something to be earned later. Signals of trust are not grand gestures. They live in the everyday moments, how we greet someone, how we listen, how we react to a mistake. Warmth and authenticity are the currency of human connection, and when paired with confidence grounded in empathy, they create relationships that are not only productive but deeply human. Long before words are spoken, our bodies are already communicating. In fact, research shows that a significant portion of first impressions comes not from what we say, but from how we carry ourselves. Posture, eye contact, and micro-expressions are silent signals that reveal more about our confidence, openness, and intentions than any rehearsed introduction could convey. Posture is one of the clearest indicators of presence. When we stand tall with our shoulders open, we project confidence and approachability. A slouched stance, by contrast, can signal disinterest, insecurity, or even defensiveness. People often interpret posture unconsciously, but those interpretations shape whether they lean in to engage with us or pull back. Eye contact is another powerful tool. Steady, warm eye contact communicates attentiveness and respect. It tells the other person, I see you and you matter in this moment. Avoiding eye contact, on the other hand, may trigger doubt or distrust even if unintentionally. Too much intensity can overwhelm, but balanced, genuine eye contact creates instant connection. Micro-expressions, those fleeting facial movements that last only a fraction of a second, often reveal emotions more honestly than words. A quick smile, a raised eyebrow, or a tightening of the lips can all be read by the brain almost instantly. These subtle cues either reinforce the trust we're trying to build or undermine it, depending on whether they align with our spoken message. The challenge is that body language cannot easily be faked. We might attempt to force a smile or adopt a power pose, but if our internal state doesn't match, people sense the disconnect. Authenticity is key. The most effective body language flows from genuine presence. When we are comfortable, grounded, and truly engaged, our posture, expressions, and gestures naturally align. Think of a leader walking into a room. Before they speak, their stance sets the tone. Do they stride in with openness, or do they close themselves off with crossed arms? Do they meet people's eyes with curiosity, or do they glance past them in distraction? In those first seconds, the room has already made a decision about whether to follow their lead. Body language also carries cultural weight. While the specifics may vary across societies, the underlying principle remains nonverbal cues shape perception faster than words. A bowed head in one culture might signal respect, in another it might read as submission. Understanding the universality of presence and the nuances of culture allows us to communicate more effectively across boundaries. Ultimately, body language is the unspoken amplifier of our message. It is the bridge between intention and perception, between what we hope to communicate and what others actually receive. In those initial seconds, it often speaks louder than anything we say, shaping the emotional tone of every interaction that follows. When we think about making a strong first impression, most of us focus on what we will say. Yet the truth is that one of the most powerful ways to stand out is not through speaking, but through listening. In those initial moments, people are less interested in hearing how brilliant we are and more interested in sensing whether we recognize their worth. Listening is the fastest way to communicate that value. Listening is not a passive act. It is an active signal that says, you matter enough for me to give you my full attention. When we put down distractions, maintain eye contact, and lean into someone's words, we demonstrate respect. That respect creates trust, and trust opens the door to deeper connection far faster than any polished self-introduction. The irony is that many people approach first impressions as if they need to impress. They prepare clever lines, rehearse answers, and focus on showcasing their expertise. But people rarely remember the person who dominated the conversation. They remember the one who made them feel understood, even a brief exchange. Listening also helps us adapt. When we truly pay attention to someone's words, tone, and body language, we gather valuable information about who they are and what they care about. That information allows us to respond in ways that resonate, rather than offering generic or misplaced remarks. It is through listening that we find the quickest path to relevance. There is also a psychological layer at play. Humans are wired to crave acknowledgement. When someone listens deeply, it affirms our sense of importance. It tells us we are not invisible. In those first moments of being heard, we naturally become more open, more trusting, and more receptive to the person in front of us. Listening creates a powerful contrast in a noisy world. Most interactions today are rushed, distracted, and transactional. When someone takes the time to pause, focus, and truly hear us, it feels rare. That rarity alone makes the listener memorable. They stand out not because of what they said, but because they created an experience of being valued. Leaders who understand this principle often begin conversations by asking questions rather than delivering answers. They flip the script, recognizing that credibility grows not only from what they know, but from how well they understand others. This approach shifts the first impression from self-centeredness to mutual respect, setting the stage for stronger collaboration. In the end, listening in those first moments is not about strategy, it's about humanity. It is the simple, profound act of valuing others before seeking to be valued ourselves. And in doing so, we often find that people are far more willing to hear our ideas, trust our intentions, and remember us long after the words themselves have faded. A strong first impression can open a door, spark curiosity, and create an initial sense of trust. But what truly determines whether that trust lasts is consistency. People may be impressed in the moment, but they are always watching to see if our actions align with our words over time. A first impression is the invitation. Consistency is what proves it was real. Consistency signals reliability. When someone shows up the same way across different situations, calm under pressure, respectful in conversation, honest in decision-making, we begin to believe they can be counted on. This reliability becomes a foundation for respect, because respect grows when people know they don't have to guess who we will be tomorrow. Without consistency, even the strongest first impression crumbles. If someone starts with warmth but later shows indifference, or if they appear confident but then act irresponsibly, the inconsistency breeds doubt. Inconsistency feels like deception, and once trust is broken, the original impression no longer matters. What makes consistency powerful is that it doesn't require perfection. People don't expect us to always get everything right. They expect us to be steady in character. Admitting mistakes, following through on promises, and treating people with fairness again and again carry more weight than flawless performance in a single moment. Think about the colleagues, friends, or leaders you respect most. It's rarely because of one dazzling introduction. It's because, over time, they proved that the way they showed up on day one was not an act. Their reliability became part of their reputation, and their reputation became their influence. Consistency also provides comfort. In uncertain or high-pressure environments, people look for those who bring stability. The person who maintains composure and integrity, regardless of circumstances, becomes a touchstone others rely on. That steadiness builds respect that endures far beyond the first meeting. Even small actions matter in reinforcing consistency. Responding promptly, keeping commitments, and showing the same level of courtesy to everyone. These patterns accumulate. Over time, they form a story about who we are, and that story carries more influence than any single encounter could. A first impression may spark attention, but consistency is what deepens relationships. It transforms curiosity into trust, trust into respect, and respect into loyalty. The lasting impression we leave is not written in a single moment, but in the rhythm of our behavior day after day. First impressions are often framed as tests, moments where we feel pressure to prove our worth, showcase our competence, or deliver the perfect introduction. But reframing them as invitations changes everything. Instead of being about performance, they become about possibility. Each encounter is not a judgment to pass, but a doorway to connection, trust, and future opportunities. When we see first impressions as invitations, the pressure lifts. We no longer need to cram our value into the first 7 seconds. Instead, we can focus on creating space for a relationship to grow. This shift allows us to show up with authenticity because we are not performing, we are opening a door. An invitation signals welcome. It says, I am here, and I am open to knowing you. This attitude transforms the dynamic from self-promotion to mutual discovery. Rather than trying to prove ourselves, we invite others into a shared space where trust can begin to take root. Consider how this perspective alters body language, tone, and presence. When we approach a meeting as a test, our energy tightens. We rush to impress, we overthink, we push too hard. But when we approach it as an invitation, our energy softens. We listen more, we smile more, we create ease. That ease is magnetic because it lowers defenses and makes others feel safe. First impressions as invitations also acknowledge that relationships unfold over time. No single moment can capture the full depth of who we are. What we can do, however, is set the tone for future interactions. By creating an opening, we plant the seed for trust and respect to grow in the days, weeks, and months ahead. This approach also helps us navigate mistakes. If we stumble on our words or feel nervous, it matters less when the other person senses our genuine openness. People are forgiving when they feel our intent is to connect rather than to impress. The invitation outweighs the imperfection. Leaders, mentors, and peers who embody this mindset often stand out. They don't make others feel evaluated or tested in early moments. Instead, they make them feel welcomed. Their first impression leaves behind not pressure, but possibility, a sense that something meaningful could develop. Ultimately, treating first impressions as invitations reminds us that the goal is not to prove ourselves in an instant, but to open a door wide enough for trust, collaboration, and opportunity to walk through. Each encounter is the beginning of a story, and how we extend that invitation shapes what the story can become.